favorite subject, by the way, financial inclusion. I think there's a lot of potential here. And I'm delighted to welcome our three panelists. Do we have other mics for them? We'll share. So I'm really excited to have you guys to talk about financial inclusion. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves very briefly, and then give one definition of what financial inclusion is for you.
Hello, my name is Miguel Prados. I came from the social local economies area and joined it with the blockchain technology. And for me, social inclusion is the ability of the population to issue credit for themselves instead of depending on the banks.
Hey, I'm Gustav and I work for MakerDAO. We are the market leaders within what's called like decentralized or open finance. I'm responsible for the business development we do in Europe, but I also do a lot of our projects in emerging markets such as in Africa or Southeast Asia. And financial inclusion from like my perspective, I like working with Maker and in decentralized finance, is really about access. We believe that there are so many people out there who doesn't have access right now, and we don't believe it's because the system can't serve them. We believe it's because the system don't think it's profitable to serve them. And this is where we kind of like want to step in and create equal opportunity.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Raphael. I'm the CEO of a company called Alice. We're a social finance network built on the blockchain, and which I'll talk about in a second. Financial inclusion for me is all about giving people agency over financial decisions. There are a lot of people that maybe have access or have a bank account already, but don't really have a say about what's going on in the financial systems and the financial markets.
So to start, how can we describe the current issues of the financial system in terms of not giving agency to people, and how does the blockchain solve some of those issues? Easy question.
Well, the social local currencies have been working for a long time, but the problem is that they have a really reduced impact on the population. On the other side, blockchain is like a speculative way of issue tokens. And I think when those two things merge, that there are loads of possibilities that can open. The banks has the ability to issue credit, and that's the main thing. That's where the sovereign relies. And I think in this new era of this digitalization, we need to transfer that power from the banks to the people. And it's not to bank the unbanked, it's to make the people their own banks. That's what I think it should be.
Yeah, so that's actually exactly what we're doing. but yeah, I mean, like the way that we really see it is that like we have this like capitalistic world, right? And we see that, you know, like everywhere where it's profitable to provide financial services, the banks do it, right? So the perspective and like the hypothesis that we have around some of these things, it's not so much that we lack the ability to provide it, but we really lack like a more cost-efficient way. And I believe like the blockchain and like the applications you can build on top of it creates first off like a trustless framework, so you don't have to trust like a newly opened regional branch of some, you know, random bank, but instead you can kind of like trust like the general network and like the equal opportunities that provides. So for us, like we really see that as kind of like this flaw in the current system. So I like this saying when you call it like the underserved instead of the unbanked, because we truly believe that right now they are underserved. And what we want to do is we want to incentivize local entrepreneurs to build services that maintain their integrity because of the blockchain layer. And thereby, you know, instead of needing like a local filial, like a local department of a bank with staff and running costs and all that stuff, you can provide financial services by downloading an application that takes you 30 seconds to install on your phone.
Yeah, and for me it's all about just the misallocation of capital. You know, you were saying before that there's like a $2.5 trillion gap every year to meet the SDGs. And the reality is that there's a lot of money out there, except it's being put into places that don't necessarily move the needle. And all of that, as far as we're concerned anyway, is because there's a massive information asymmetry. We actually don't know what works and what doesn't, and that's whether it's government funding, philanthropy, impact investing, etc. With that information asymmetry also comes like an imbalance of power, because the only people who have a view around what works and what doesn't are big funds, big governments, etc. You don't know, you might make a donation or something, but you don't necessarily know what good it does. It just gives you that feel-good story. You pay your taxes, you clearly, the EU is a case in point, has a really bad image because nobody knows what they do in the UK where I live. I'm French, but in the UK where I live, we just think the EU is all about, you know, regulating the curvature of bananas or whatever. And all of that leads to really high transaction costs, because if you don't know what works, then you don't know where to allocate the money. All the data is held in silos, and everybody's replicating or reinventing the wheel all the time, which just makes it really difficult to know where to put that money to really have an impact.
Yeah, interesting. And so I'd love to get into the details of your project and how you address those issues, right? How do you address the inefficiencies of the current system? How does your solution help the underserved?
Well, what we do really is the next step after you create a local coin. So you create a local community coin, which is based on blockchain. But as soon as you create that, you realize that coin that has a cultural base, because it's used by a community and it has a cultural heritage. As soon as you make transfer the next step you will need is to be able to exchange that local token with other local tokens. So what we create is what is called the Caja de Ahorros Digital, digital saving banks, which basically allow an ecosystem of local coins within a city. So mostly it's based on a council coin. Council coin, the city council should be one of the main players, but not the majority of that system. So the council issue a local coin, called a council coin, and then various communities like agricultural, cultural, social responsibility enterprises, they issue their own tokens. And what we produce is a liquidity system. So those council coins are able to be used in local commerces, and those cultural coins are able to be used to catch the bus in the city council. So you not limit the communities to create their own tokens, because one of the main things is to be able to produce your own governance. So each local coin has to have their own governance. So you have a system with various governance systems that are able to interact with other local coins on a liquidity system. So you don't intervene on the communities telling them how you need to govern themselves. You just intervene to provide a mechanism of liquidity, so all the tokens in the ecosystem are able to create an impact with all those coins together. That's what the Caja de Ahorros Digital, digital saving banks does. It's a liquidity system for local produced coins, where the city council is one of the major actors.
Can you just remind everyone where you're based?
I'm based in Seville, in south of Spain.
So at MegaDAO, we really created like an alternative financial system where you don't have to rely on a single trusted party. We have a credit facility, so people, they are able to lock up collateral. Currently it's only crypto collateral, so trustless assets. And then based on the value of that collateral, they can basically take out a loan against their own ability to unlock the collateral later on by repaying the debt they have. So we currently have close to $500 million of collateral in our system. And this collateral is then backing a stablecoin called DAI. So DAI really aimed to be the first truly unbiased currency which has maintained stability. So what we really set out to create was something that held the inherent properties of what blockchain was supposed to be, So, decentralized, like an open peer-to-peer transactional system, kind of like an alternative financial class, and then we have added stability to it. When you then lock up the collateral in the system and you take out a loan, there's an interest rate that needs to get paid. And this interest rate goes to two different things. It goes to the people governing the system. So we have like a community of another token. It's a little bit complicated, this part of it, but like we have a community of like another token who is the decision makers in the system. So we don't sit as the foundation and take any specific like strong measurements or like actions in the protocol, at least not in the long term. And then the other part of the profits, we redistribute them back to the people using the system. So we give it to people using DAI. So actually right now, no matter where you are in the world, if you hold DAI, you can earn close to 8% in interest rate just for having a digital dollar. This is something where the way that the system kind of like is set up and the building of it right now is that a lot of the collateral is from the Western world, like the developed economies. So we see a lot of collateral from Europe and the US, Asia, the northern part of Asia. But a lot of the usage with DAI is in economies where a digital dollar makes a lot of sense. So specifically, places like Argentina and also Southeast Asia, Venezuela. We have started to gain more and more traction in Africa as well. Because we give people like a very, very easy way to access something which they didn't have access to before. So like digital savings accounts and permissionless lending protocol is kind of like the basics of it. It's a pretty complex project, but I think this is like the basic outline.
And at Alice, what we do is we have a system or protocol that incentivizes the creation of transparent and validated impact data. So what that means is that what we're trying to do is just break out data about how effective a social environmental project is from data silos, make sure that everybody can see what works and what doesn't, and then can make more informed capital allocation decisions as to where they're going to put their money. And it's really important because it reduces, just sort of slashes transaction costs involved in funding social environmental projects, because you can do your due diligence, impact due diligence in a much easier way, because the information is there about whether a project works or not. And because of the automation that smart contracts provide, it also cuts down on performance management costs. You can see in quasi-real time the effectiveness of a given project. And the way that we do all of that, the specific incentive mechanisms, are that social environmental projects don't get paid until the outcomes that they want to achieve have actually been achieved and validated, and then everything is put on the blockchain. And then we have a bunch of financial mechanisms, lending mechanisms, if you like, where investors can provide money up front, so that these projects don't take the risk of a project failing. Because how do you run a project before you have the money? Well, people can provide loans, and they get paid back if the projects are successful. So the NGOs or the social enterprises running the projects don't have to shoulder that risk. And it's a way of making a profit on social environmental projects, which we think is a much better thing to do than making a profit on dirty energy or or even environmentally neutral solutions. So,
thank you. And so I think it's interesting to see two trends. One is obviously the macro economic situation we're in, where we have negative interest rates, but also in some countries where we have very high inflation and no certainty about the local currencies. We talked about DAI, which is what we call a stable coin, which we've seen a lot of these stable coins emerge after Bitcoin, who was so volatile that people were wondering how they were going to pay and what the value is when it was transferred. It was transferred immediately and cheaply, but you get one rate one day, and then the next day you don't know what the rate is going to be. So we see the emergence of these stable coins, which allow you to pay internationally. And more recently, Facebook and Libra had a project to create this currency, which would also, in addition to just transfer funds, allow you to purchase things with a lot of the Libra partners. That created a lot of emotion with governments, a lot of reactions with regulators, because Libra wanted to do a basket, have as in the underlying of the stablecoin, a basket of global currencies. And, you know, had it been triggered on, it would have become the largest bank in the world with 2 billion users. So when we see these massive projects, how do you think your projects, you know, how are they different compared to that, and how do you see adoption of your projects moving forward?
Well, I think if you think in terms of adoption, I mean, WhatsApp is going to issue their own currency, so it's going to be the easiest one. Just to transfer money via WhatsApp, it can be easier than that, I think. So it's not a problem well, it's an adoption problem, but it's all about governance. Who is able to issue that money and who is able to govern that money? So I think you can go to fight a war in two ways. It is a global war, but where we can't do anything against WhatsApp or Facebook or the big hedge funds. Or you can do a guerrilla war, which is more likely to succeed. So the social coins are the guerrilla war. So why they can succeed? Because they have their own governance mechanism. They have their own cultural values. They have their own communities. They know each other. So they are able to issue credit. I issue credit because I trust you, and I know that you're gonna give me that money back at some point, or maybe not, but the other project will be. So we are more into a guerrilla war rather than a global war. And I think that's the way it can succeed. If you create multiple local coins that are able to have a liquidity mechanism in between them that are related to the local council. Local council are far more resilient than states, because the states have been there like for 500 years, but the city of Cadiz has been there for 3,000 years, and this city of Barcelona has been here for 2,800 years. So they are really resilient, more than nations, more than Europe. We just lost one. Europe. So local communities based on local council are quite resilient. So let's make a guerrilla war. Let's create our cultural local tokens, and let's create liquidity mechanism to be able to create local economies, respecting the governance of each of those groups. And I think that's the way to fight with the big corporate issues. And I think DAO would be a fantastic token to be exchanged to those local coins.
Yeah, I mean, so like first of all, I think Libra, there's some of the aspects of the project I really like. So I'm not like very 100% against Libra. I used to live in Argentina, so I know how it feels to live in a country with inflation. And this is something that, you know, this is also like the same mission that we try to solve it in some ways. We just try to solve it like slightly differently. So I think like one of the biggest things is that like if you have Libra, the money that you know the money that backend generates, it goes to the Libra investors, right? And like you as the end consumer, like even though you should have a claim on it, like you don't, right? Because you have to pay for the infrastructure. So like the way that we kind of like take there, we can create a DAI that has the peg to Libra basically. But like if you hold DAI, you will just earn an interest rate, and if you hold Libra, you won't. We also take pride in, and that's like how we have instructed from the beginning, is to be more than just a stablecoin. So we are not just like a digital representation of fiat currency. We have an entire ecosystem around it, specifically around financial services, which is why we can have like a very high yielding savings account. We can provide collateralized loans for the moment. Later on, we're also expanding to move outside of only using crypto as collateral in our protocol. So in November, we launched the version called multi-collateral DAI, So eventually we want to scale it up and having thousands of collateral types in the system, like in the very long run, of course. So we want to build something which is more than just a stablecoin. But like on the specific like payment use case, Libra might beat us in that specific one because they can just go in and use the network effect. But we do believe that we have some very, very strong propositions like outside of just being a stablecoin. And some of the things that kind of like have proved our hypothesis a little bit in this is that we are extremely popular within like the crypto ecosystems, and even some of the companies like fintech companies that is like living on the periphery of crypto also very interested in us. So we have more than 450 partners globally that already has DAI integrated and available to their users. We work with platforms that has millions and millions and millions of users that already have access to our technology. And I mean, of course, it's not going in and like onboarding something like WhatsApp or Facebook from day one, as Libra will be able to. But we have like a more kind of like a grassroots approach in that sense, which I think is also like a benefit in some way, because as we have seen, one of the big problems Libra have had is that they came out with like a big reputation, Facebook in the back, and they went to all the regulators and they said, we're going to do this, regulators. Where like for like the crypto industry in general, that hasn't been an opportunity at all, because the regulators wouldn't really talk with you when you were just launching out. So I think I still not sure when Libra will actually go live, because I think they still have like a little bit of legal things to solve. But like we're definitely prepared to like prove that we have like a very different value proposition than Libra if and when they go live.
I make the difference. I have a split personality. I have the guerrilla warrior in me. I believe in that guerrilla warfare, but there's a lot that needs to change in the current system. But then there's the pragmatic entrepreneur. So I think that I'm a huge fan of DAI. I think it's one of the most important building blocks of the Ethereum ecosystem and maybe of the broader crypto ecosystem. It's something that's kicked off the concept of composability in the blockchain space. So this idea that you can, because every system, every protocol is built on the same blockchain using stable coins, and they can all start integrating together. And we've started integrating DAI within our protocol as well. But at the same time, when we're working with institutional players, with big impact investment funds or the government, whatever, there's just no way that they will use DAI, at least not right now. So if and when Libra comes online, we'll use it in a heartbeat, because anything that's native to blockchain that can integrate with what we're doing and that is acceptable to institutional players is what we think is going to get our kind of systems into the mainstream and scale it.
And that segues well into almost my final question. You said that some institutions would never use DAI at this stage. What have been the other issues that you've encountered when you're in your entrepreneurial journey, when you wanted to drive adoption, get new clients, etc.? Are there specific hurdles? If you had a magic wand, if you could take them out, what would that be?
For the social coin, when they try to like make it into blockchain, they try to make it here with the REC coin in Barcelona, and there's still a huge gap in between technology and the social background of it. Here, for instance, they were more into the social background than with the technology. So they construct a blockchain which is one node. And as you agree, a blockchain with one node is not a blockchain. Not even a private one. So that was a failure. There's still a huge gap in between technologies and social activism. And but there are many people working on closing that gap. So I think technology will be one of the barriers, as you say. And the other is to understand how this social inclusion may work. So I think coins, social coins, must be inclusive in an overall term. So that means that a social coin in a city must be used on the poorest areas and on the richest areas, because there's no way for a social coin to succeed if it's only reduced to certain uses, like for instance social inclusion. If you use the social coin for social inclusion, then it's the poor's coin, and that even increases the exclusion. So when we talk about social inclusion of community coins, we're talking about liquidity systems that make the coin desirable. So one of the other barriers to come forward is to understand that inclusion means that everybody goes on board, not just a certain part of the population. So, for instance, they issue a token for the poorest people in Sevilla, and that creates even more inequality, because when they use that, it was like the poorest coins, and that's not the way. So you issue a coin, a local coin, you issue for being used to be fashionable and to be used in the richest areas or in the poorest areas, and this to be something culturally adopted, like tied to the local community in Sevilla or in Barcelona. So technological gap is one of the barriers, and understanding of the what social inclusion means and on the government side.
So I think for us, there's like two main things that has been like, I wouldn't say like setting us back, but at least that we feel is something that we're still dealing with today. And that's like the development of our own project, and as well as like the development of the ecosystem, right? So we don't have a lot of retail customer-facing services products. So the way that we work, as I mentioned earlier, is that we incentivize local entrepreneurs. We also have a grants program, so we have given over 50 grants in the last, I think, 14 months. And like really try to like incentivize people to build services and products using DAI or the Maker protocol in some way to try reach the end population. And then we also have just like the roadmap we have ourselves. I mean, we have been preaching like the vision. The team has been preaching the vision of like Maker since 2015, right? But we just launched like the full update in November last year. So it has taken like a long time to develop. A lot of our partners are still in development. A lot of the projects that we really want to work with, we believe a lot in, is still in development. So I really think like the industry is still a little bit immature. I think that like over like the next year, as the services and products become better and better, I personally believe that crypto and fintech will start merging more together. Because, for example, some of the products that we have built now, it's not necessarily something that people would, put in context with crypto, because it's like non-speculative. It's like kind of like stable deposit savings accounts, things of like that order. And that's really kind of like the products that we want to push out, and we want to integrate ourselves more into like the fintech industry, right? So creating products that are competitive with the solutions that people are currently using from fintech companies, and working with kind of like this part of the scene as well. That's something that we really want to focus on. But I still believe that like a lot of the projects and a lot of the partners that we have that has a big potential, they need a little bit more time to like finish the product and make it production ready. So I think it's kind of like a combination of just it takes a long time to build these things. The industry is a little bit immature still. Like a lot of the products haven't really been finished. And when you build something on the blockchain, you release it, you also kind of like need to wait a little bit of time before you actually like ship it to the masses, because if there's like a bug or something, you rather want to find it when you have 1,000 users rather than when you have 1 million. So like just like the general roadmap of building trustless products and services are very long. But I also believe that like within like the next few years, we will end at like a point where there'll be a lot of like what we today call crypto products, which will just be very competitive against like the current like financial technology solutions in the market. And that's when I personally believe that we will really see like the industry starting to scale much more like organic and efficiently than we have seen today, where most of it is done through like manually created partnerships and like a lot of like labor from like the foundations, and Consensus has also been doing like a really good job on that front too, right? So that's kind of like the sort of takeaways that we have seen. It's like great potential, but I think we're still like a little early.
And from our perspective, I agree with both what you've said, by the way. From our perspective, though, one additional challenge is that connection with the real world. I think that you were talking about it before, the regulatory certainty, the contractual certainty that's required to get institutional organizations on board with what we're doing. If I had a magic wand, I'd probably erase the whole ICO thing, that would be awesome, because there's, paradoxically, for a trustless system, there's a lot of mistrust in the technology, and people are like overly cautious, and that goes for impact investment funds, that goes for government certainly as well. There is a lot more engagement, but it's still, and you have a much better view than me on this, but a lot of POCs being done at government level, a lot of reports, tons of reports, but not real sort of engagement with the technology. And what we found ourselves doing a lot of is actually, beyond building the technology and building the systems, is also working on the compliance side, the regulatory side, figuring out ways to make our smart contracts legally enforceable. We rolled our own stablecoin, working with escrow agents, which is like semi-centralized. It's not ideal, but it helps us to get over that barrier of people asking us, well, what happens if there's a hack, where the funds go and all the rest. So I think it would be great if, as a whole, the crypto industry, but also governments, legal firms, etc., could accelerate on that. It would be really great.
So I have a last questions for our panelists, but I want to open it up to the audience before that. Are there any questions or additional questions?
So first, thank you for all what you said, and that was really interesting. Vanessa is about Libra, and there is another major thing coming, that are the central banks' initiative for creating their own digital currencies, and that's there is quite of a paradox, because on one side there is a G7 that agreed that there is a problem of financial exclusion today with traditional system. On the other side, you have central banks that are interested in issuing their own digital currency, but most of them say that it would be interesting on the wholesale part, but not to issue a retail one. So first, do you agree with this conclusion? And then maybe it's in the sense of what you were saying. Do you think that synergies with central banks, inclusions with central bank, could help fighting for the same things that you're prompting today?
I think the central bank issuing currency is a good thing, because at the end you will end up with loads of coins in your pocket in your mobile phone. So the importance will come with and it's an issue for research about liquidity mechanism. And so here in Barcelona you will have your Chinese renminbi digital with the euro digital, and maybe you will have the REC when it become a blockchain, the local coin, plus a couple of local coins from here. So you will have those in your pocket. You will not know which one, how much you have of each. You just know that you can pay everywhere with that. So you don't bother that much how much of each of those you know. You may have some dice for getting that interest, which is interesting, but you didn't. You may not know which tokens you currently have. So I think it will evolve in that way. Obviously, there will be a huge fight, but as I said, I don't know who's going to win that. But in my mind, the ideal scenario will be you have loads of coins in your pocket and you can pay without knowing which are you using to pay. So that's how I think it will evolve.
So I think that it can be done in a really good way. It can also be done in a very dangerous way. And also, if you see in some of the countries who's been on the forefront of exploring this, I might question the motives behind it a little bit, because the thing is, I'm not going to mention any countries, but Denmark just had flagged for releasing a cartoon. So, for example, if you see a central bank issuing a retail-focused digital currency on a permission blockchain, using the framework that they want, they could essentially go in and control the entire economy, right? It would be the first time where a central bank was in a position where it would have unprecedented control over what's happening. They could decide what you can buy, who you can transfer to. They can go and revert transactions. And if we look at some of the governments around the world, I think this is actually something that some governments are interested in. And this is where I think it might be pretty dangerous. But then we have in Europe, where like the European Central Bank recently released a research report on how to ensure data privacy if you use a central bank digital currency. And I think this is like a very positive step in the right direction. But I'm very concerned that there will be steps in the wrong direction too. And also, like you can imagine, like what do you even do in a country if, for example, like a crisis comes up, and the crisis comes up because the central bank fucked with the economy, right? That is something which I believe is a very plausible scenario, and I don't even know how you would go in and like regulate that, or what do you even do, right? Previously, these things have been kind of like separated, where the commercial banks have been, kind of like the ones enabling the market forces. So I can see it as being like a positive thing. I can also see it as being like a negative thing. I really think we need more insights as to what are like the motives for the countries doing it. I think like a retail solution that Banque de France have talked about, I don't see that having any impact at all. I don't see why you would even need it. Like why would you need blockchain to transfer money between French banks? But like if you're using like an international system, I think all of a sudden it starts to make more sense. But like on the retail side, I'm a little bit skeptical on some of the projects.
Yes, I'll totally agree. I will talk about one country because I live there and they can't ban me access. But the UK, for example, one of the first trials or pilots that was done with blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies was to disperse benefits and to try to control. There was an aspect of we can decide where those benefits can be spent and how, which is obviously really dangerous. And it feels like you might have that there's a trade-off somewhere between just everybody being their own bank and having full privacy, but then if something goes wrong, it's then extremely difficult to get what's your due back because smart contracts just irremediably transfer that money. But then again, in the current system, what we do is we go to courts, and as long as you can identify somebody, then you can maybe have a legal decision against them, etc. Or sacrifice privacy, which I think is a really dangerous slope, because if they can start seeing, if anybody actually can start seeing what you're spending your money on, then we're going to live in a very dystopian society. But then again, I have a split personality. If the moment that the central bank issues some Ethereum compatible cryptocurrency, we're all in, we're going to start using that stuff. So
Any other questions?
But I think it will go both ways, because I think it will go both ways. If the Chinese want us to use their renminbi digital client, they need to allow them to use their own another currency. So it's like a trade-off. At some point, in that trade-off, there's no space for that dystopian society where everybody's controlling everybody's movement of money. So it will reach some kind of social consensus where there might be an equilibrium in between the GDPR protection, the data protection from Europe, and the over-controlling people of China. So there will be some trade-off, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be only in one way. So it's not that we're going to be controlled by the Chinese spies because we use their digital currency. It's more like if they want to go to an open market of digital currency, they will have to do some trade-off themselves. So there will be an equilibrium, I think, at some sort of stage. So we give data already, so just for having free email. So
trusting in basic economics.
Sure.
Maybe that will work. Any other questions?
So my question is about the relevance of open banking as an easier, simpler potential that can solve many of the use cases for, let's say, programmable money. So what's the relationship between the new open banking APIs and fintech startups that are enabling financial inclusion using that vis-a-vis blockchain?
Yeah, so I mean, like the open banking initiatives in Europe, for example, we have some partners who works on like very, very easy ways for you to get in and out of crypto, like directly in like an application using, for example, like a Revolut card. So like the good thing about this is you can really reduce a lot of like the friction and like delay of like you getting into the digital currencies. So the way that we have seen this, we have also given grants to a project dealing with a specifically called Ramp Network, a UK company. And that's basically, you know, like really using these open banking frameworks to reduce the friction of getting in and out. So that's like some of the things that we see. I think still like what the open banking in like regards to financial inclusion, I think like some of the places that needs it the most, they don't really have very strong local banking infrastructure. So like having like similar frameworks there is very difficult, right? You mentioned the project in the Philippines, and we have a guy from my team who used to work in the Philippines, and when he had to pay employees who had a different bank than him, he couldn't do a transfer because it would take 2 weeks, even just transferring from to another local bank, right? So he would pick up cash and drive to their house when he had to pay them salaries. So I think in a country like that, it's gotten a little bit better now, but it's still very, very far away from having even like a localized version that can deal with the local banking infrastructure. So having like a bigger open banking initiative, I think is very far out. You also see in regions with like capital controls that we see both in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America. It's also very difficult because if you have capital controls, the other people like the open banking network needs to be okay with the capital controls that you impose on the people that you have using it, right? So I think in places like that, it's very difficult to imagine it right now. But like you can hope that like Mercosur, which is, you know, like the trade union in South America, I mean, you could hope that they could come up with like a framework eventually where people will be able to. But yeah, and also just when you go across different currencies, it also becomes infinitely more difficult, right? So yeah, I mean, in the future it might play like a bigger role, but like in regards to financial inclusion, I don't really see it hitting like a lot of the core markets yet.
And there are other things as well. Like for example, one of the projects that we're working on is there's this impact investment fund that buys buildings, provides them as social housing, and then works with charities to provide social support services to the tenants who are former homeless people. And what they do is they put incentives in a kind of an escrow account using our system that the tenants can earn if they achieve their goals. So if they go to job training, if they go to mental health support, things like that. And so in that sense, what you put into that escrow account isn't necessarily money. And I think that the difference with open banking is that a token is not just necessarily the equivalent of cash, whatever that cash might be. It might be something else. So if a token could represent fractional ownership of your social housing, right? And that you'll be able to hold that in the same wallet and in the same way and transfer it in the same way as you do currently cash. So I think open banking is great. I think it's great for programmable money. I just don't think that it's necessarily incompatible. It's actually quite complementary to what the crypto space is trying to do.
One last question.
So back to central bank digital currencies, Gustav, I echo your reservations. I just want to ask your views on cross-border payments, and because there will be friction when these central banks issue these digital currencies. So will that give an uprise or an opportunity to a company maybe like Libra who can transact frictionlessly across borders?
I mean, Libra will work in a similar sense, but like you can transfer Libra frictionlessly if the other person also wants to receive Libra, right? Like for example, if you want to change, you know, Libra to Dai or Libra to like the Chinese digital, like yen or something, then you will have it a little bit again. However, I mean, already now in like the crypto space, we have seen some projects focusing on like arbitrage between stablecoins, and you can actually trade like, for example, DAI against USDC, which is a really big centralized stablecoin, and you pay maybe 50 to 20 basis points for the conversion. So like if you would, and this is like in the crypto space where like, you know, we have like $130 million in DAI market cap, and USDC I think has 500 million or something, so very small, right? So you can imagine if like a central bank issues its digital currency, you will have a market cap of billions of dollars. So you will be able to reduce it even more. So I think like when you have like highly correlated assets, which most fiat currencies currently are, unless you live in regions that can't really control the local currencies, so like have it in like a positive way. Then you can actually create like very, very cheap forex conversions between them. And like a lot of the friction now is the fact that like the SWIFT system is this weird thing where they kind of like help people like convert it, but it's very, very inefficient, right? So I think like you can just imagine, like an exchange function where you could trade these digital currencies like against each other, and I think it would be very cheap.
I have one last question for our panelists. We haven't prepared that question, so just a brief answer. In 10 years, what will financial inclusion in the digital economy look like?
I think communities will be able to issue their own credit money, and that will be.
Yeah, I think most of the financial services will move on to people's phones, which will also be connected to like sovereign identity and everything like that. So I think you'll be able to do like all your financial services directly from your phone. We've already seen the evolution now, like the local filials of the banks are like decreasing a lot. They're simply closing because there's not a lot of need for them anymore, and I believe this will really continue. Hopefully we will get some strong security around like, are you actually the one using your phone? But yeah, I believe like most of it will move digital and most of it will move to mobile.
Yeah, I agree with both those, and I think one additional step, which is from our perspective, I think it will enable people who need support to have just much greater agency, a much bigger voice in determining what that support should be and how it's delivered, and be able to provide feedback. I think that's going to be coming as well, hopefully.
Well, I want to say a big thank you to our panel. You have amazing projects, and I'm sure you'll have time to speak to them a little bit later on today. Thank you.